Hey everybody, Benjamin Scott the second here. You can just call me Ben. It's been quite a while since I did a tutorial for you guys. I'd safe to say probably going on close to a year. A lot of people have asked, what the hell happened to you? Well, startup. Basically, I got my company DSME Labs back off the ground again. I got a lot of the original crew, original founder, Michael Dash, myself are back at it again. And anyway, we've been working really hard at DSME Labs, trying to go back and revitalize a lot of our products and basically getting back into doing building apps for a lot of major brands out there. So anyway, long story short, that has consumed a lot of my time, and that's why I've kind of disappeared. But one of the great things is my wife, for our anniversary present, built me this awesome home office with a 8-bit retro theme going on, and so I got like my own little man cave here, and I plan on spending some nights to start getting my tutorial servers back up again. Lots of requests, lots of great feedback. Thank you so much. Got lots of subscribers. I want to keep this thing going, and I want to share my experiences and help you guys out there learn how to do iOS dev. It's mobile super hot, iOS is super hot. And of course that's my background is iOS. Obviously Android's really hot too. There's plenty of people out there that know Android really well, that are doing great tutorials out there for that. So my focus is going to be iOS. Specifically going forward, a couple of things I want to point out. I'm only going to be touching on iOS like 5.0 specifics and greater. Obviously we're not going to get into 6.0 until it becomes public in the next, hopefully next few weeks or so. A lot of great things there. But even since my last tutorial, there's a lot of awesome updates and a lot of great new functionality that I want to share with you guys and explain. So the way my tutorials work, what I would say is still watch them. A lot of great stuff there. There's a good progression there. So you start off with the beginnings. It kind of shows you how to use the dev portal, things like that. Then it goes and shows you an update to Xcode 4, what some of the new features are. And then this one is basically going to be kind of a quick, one of the requests I have and just want to show you is with Xcode 4.4.1, 4.4.1, Apple got rid of the window application and replaced it with basically empty application. So a lot of people are kind of like hitting me up going, hey Ben, can you update your tutorial? But also, that your old one talked about window application. I can't find it in the Xcode. What do I do? So I'm going to show you kind of that really quick, but then I want to progress. Go to the next level, which I told you I would in my progression, which is talk about UIView today. What UIView is about, why it's important, and kind of the basic. This is a stepping stone into us getting into the next pieces. Leave you with a little bit of homework in a sense of like what to read up on. Once again, also to recap, my tutorials will never go over basic stuff like blocks and Objective-C and fundamentals like stuff like Objective-C types. Those things are things you need to read up on, like blocks. That's a new, like ever since iOS 4.0, blocks is like all over the place, and that's the big thing. And basically, memory management is another major change. So one of the things I'll touch a little bit on today, just because I'm going to create a project. But you need to read up on ARC, automatic reference counting. You used to have to do manual memory management using retain release, and now an auto release, and now with Xcode, the latest versions of the iOS is ARC, especially with 5.0, is amazing, and it's a technology that happens at the compiler level. It increases the speed of your code, and the memory management is amazing. So it's something you definitely want to utilize if you can. So anyway, stop babbling now, and once again, thanks for everybody. Thanks for the great feedback. I hope I can keep going this time. I really apologize for the really long delay, and please keep giving me feedback. Hit me up. I'm basically going to give you some information toward the end of this one about my Twitter, how you guys can get a hold of me, and basically hit me up for questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So anyway, I'm going to open up Xcode here. So you'll notice I've got version 4.4.1, the latest off the Mac App Store. Run this on Mountain Lion, and we're going to go ahead and create a new Xcode project. And I'm going to go ahead and go full screen. Oh, actually, don't let me do that until we do this. So you'll notice empty application. There's a bunch of ones that were very similar to the Xcode before this update, but you'll notice what's missing is window application, and that's caused a lot of confusion for people. We're going to go ahead and just choose empty application this time, and go ahead and create your name. We're going to do Hello Cocoa Touch again, just kind of to redo all the same steps really quickly. iPhone device, and you'll notice the checkboxes here. Use automatic reference counting. Go ahead and check that. We're going to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and save this on my desktop. Once that happens, I'm going to go ahead and go full screen here. And so this is the project view. We touched a little bit about this before. This is a nice visual view that Apple now gives you, and when you modify the things in the summary project view here, you'll notice I'm on the target. This is modifying basically values in the info plist file. Info plist file being an XML settings file that has all the basic settings for your iOS app. And for the longest time, you had to edit it as a developer. Obviously, I touched a little bit about this in the previous tutorial. Once again, with this, you can basically drag and drop your icons in the image wells. You can change your orientation, your nib files, things like that. From a deployment target, 5.1, 1.0, all this is standard stuff. But one of the things you're going to notice, let's go ahead and run this project as it stands right now. So this is what you're used to seeing. This is a standard project, nothing's been touched to it. You see a white window, right? White screen. So the problem though with that is that this is not currently using a main window nib file. There is no interface builder file for this. Apple, when they decided to do empty application now, a lot of the problems that they were getting, a lot of requests they were getting from some developers were like, what if I don't want a main window nib? What if I just want to start with a basic stuff, create everything from scratch, from code, everything, and I want to handle that. So Apple said, you know what? We're going to create an empty application. That's the core structure, and we're going to create it in code, and we're not going to create any interface builder files, and we'll let you do everything you want to do. And that's what empty application is now. So if we go ahead and close that, go back to Xcode, you're going to notice, if you compare this to the other tutorial, there is no main window nib in here. It is gone. So all your other stuff is the same though. Your frameworks, you got your app delegate in here, you got your plist file, you got your, of course, your main entry point file. So what we want to do is reconstruct what we did before, right? Just so you guys can understand what happened and what the empty application is, and get a kind of a main window but interface builder style, so you can start doing stuff visually instead of doing it through code. Once again, I do not recommend. If you guys are hardcore out there and you want to do it, great. Go for it. All the more power to you. But like I said, with the transition and a lot of things, Apple coming out with new devices all the time, with the new iPad Mini, rumors, all these things, Apple always recommends, from localization, all the power they give you in Interface Builder, they recommend to do everything through Interface Builder and not through code. I personally saw a huge transition when a lot of developers were doing stuff in code, and then Apple updated things with Retina, things like that. If they would have been doing things in Interface Builder, their lives would have been a lot easier. All the ones who wrote stuff in code and hard-coded all their views and all their values had a lot of work to do, and we actually had to convert a lot of those projects for some clients, and it was a nightmare. So stick to Interface Builder if you can for a lot of stuff. It'll make your life much easier to deal with. So if I go ahead and go into application, did finish launching with options here, which is our main entry point selector in the app delegate, and I just get rid of all these, you'll notice that Apple's doing self.window. They're creating a window alloc init with frame. They're then setting the background color to white, and then they're adding it, they're making it the key window and displaying it. But if I get rid of all this and kill it and then run it, we have nothing. It's just an app that comes up, black screen. So now let's go ahead and kill that. Let's go back to our app, and now let's get back to the point where we were in our previous tutorial, but using new Xcode 4 and the empty applications and empty application template. So first things first, let's go ahead and create a new file, create a main window nib. So over here on the left here, we're going to choose user interface category. We're going to choose a view template. We're going to choose iPhone for the device family. We're going to call it main window. If I can type. So main window. All right, cool. And let's bring that up here. So in our main window div, good stuff. I mean, it's a white window. It's exactly what we want to see when we run, right? Same thing I was explaining to you before in a previous tutorial, is I like the hierarchical view. To get to that view, you click the basically the little the show document outline play button down here, and that will give you the actual outline, the hierarchical view that I like to use. And then what we need to do is in the main window, the file owner for the main window nib is always, when you're creating like your main window, is going to be a UI application. So over in our utility pane, we're going to go to the inspector, to the attributes inspector, and we're going to, for this, the identity inspector, and we're going to, under class here, we're going to say UI application. So one of the key things, choose files owner first, that would be helpful, and then we'll do UI application. So by doing that, what that allows us to do, that's going to expose an outlet for delegate. That is the app delegate. That is all the main methods. Like the app delegate is the big daddy, right? That's getting all those main methods of applications going to terminate, applications going to suspend in the background, it's going to become active again in the foreground, I'm done launching, do these things. So the app delegate's a key piece, right, as far as the initial launch process. So we have to let the main window, the UI application, we have to set the delegate to an app delegate, right, so that it gets all those messages. Well, obviously we already have an app delegate set up, a class. We just have to somehow put that in here inside the main window nib. We're basically doing everything Apple did when they used to have the window-based application. We no longer have that. So what we're going to do is in our library pane here, we're going to go to the object library and scroll down, and you're going to find one called the object. This allows you to basically create, if you read here, provides a template for objects that are not directly available in Interface Builder. You can turn this object into an instance of any class using the custom class inspector. And that's exactly what we need. There is no app delegate object over here in our object library. So we're going to drag this generic object over here, right? And under, like it said, the class inspector here, we're going to specify and tell it, hey, we want this object over here to be an app delegate. So let's call that app delegate class. Okay. We can now go to the files owner and we can say that the app delegate for this main window is going to be the app delegate class. So now when it launches up and goes to the process and it goes to start sending the messages, right, the messages and call the selectors on the app delegate, it's now going to forward those to our actual app delegate class. So that application differential launching is now going to get called in our code as it loads this. So now that that's there, the next piece we have to do is make sure that the window for the app delegate points to this, right? So if we go to app delegate, the property app already puts a property there for a window that it connects. We need to expose that, remember, using the syntax and ID outlet. That's going to expose that to Interface Builder. So if I go back over now and I right click on the app delegate, we now have a window outlet. That was not there before. Here's the thing. If you remember, I touched on this before, that Interface Builder is smart, context aware, right? It's not going to let me set that window to this because guess what? Window is a UI window. And right now, by default, the view is a UI view. Now, here's the thing. A UI window, if you look in the documentation, is a UI view with extra functionality and features, but it's a UI view. Well, all we have to do is go into the view class inspector here, the identity inspector, and then the class, and set this to be a UI window, which is perfectly fine. Save that. Now, if we go to the app delegate and right click and go here and drag this over, there we go. It now highlights and says, okay, this is a UI window, you're good to go, let's connect it. We've now got all the pieces we need. We've got the fact that we have a main window nib. We have the files owner of that main window being a UI application. We have the delegate for the UI application, an app delegate. We have that pointed to with a custom app delegate object that we dragged in. We set the app delegate to our class that we already had, and then we pointed the files owner delegate to that app delegate so that those messages were being forwarded. We then set the app delegate window property, which we set up as an ID outlet, to then point to this window. That's all the pieces we need, right? So, awesome, let's run it. Uh-oh. Wait a minute, why is it still black? If you remember, in the previous project, Apple had a setting in the info P list that says, what is the main nib base name? What is the main nib file for this project? And it had the main window in there, right? So here's the thing, if we go look in our supporting files in our info P list, we don't have that. So it's when it goes in, the first thing it does is open this info P list to get some of those basic fundamental settings. It looks in here and says, is there a main window file? No, there's not. Then just go ahead and call the standard app delegate class you have set up in your main entry point. And real quick, if we go over here, it's going to say NS string from class app delegate class. So it's basically setting that delegate here, right? And calling that over here. So what we need to do is we need to go to here, set this to nil. We then need to go to the project and then here. And we can either do this in the info P list, but I'd rather show you, start using this because this is awesome. Like, a lot of these settings this is going to modify the info P list for you and it gets to a more visual way instead of sitting there changing the settings yourself. So there's two ways you can do that. You can go into the info P list yourself and you can add the new entry for the main nib, or you can come in here where it says main interface, drop this down, and it's going to look for basically nib files that have a UI application file owner base class style. And it finds it for us. It says main windows there, so let's choose that, right? Well, now, if you go over to the info P list, it added that. There it is. See, that's just a visual interface for the info P list. Now that entry is there. Now all the pieces are there that we need to run this. So now, if we run it, look what we got. We just went through the whole process of recreating what Apple used to give us in the basically the application-based template. We went back through, took out the code level stuff, created a main window nib, right? Set up all the properties so that it's a UI application, created the app delegate object, set that delegate for the UI application file owner to that app delegate, set the property for the UI window to the actual window view, and then set the actual the main interface in the info P list file to be the main window. And now we're here. So this brings us back to where we were. Not to get too crazy, I don't want to spend too much more time on it, but then at this point, if you guys recall, so if you recall now, in the app delegate, we at least set a label in here. So let's do that real quick now. This is all kind of recap if you guys have watched my tutorials before. So let's just do that. We then center it, right? Get rid of the text. We bring in a button down here, just so that we're kind of back to the same. Double click, right? Go touch. All right. Then we go to our assistant editor view, which is going to bring us into the view here. So we can start creating, our outlets and stuff. I'm going to control drag over to here to create a property. This is going to be the hello label, right? And then I'm going to create another one, control drag. This is the hello button. And I'm going to control drag again. This time I'm going to create an action. Type as UI button. action type for the sender. I'm just going to say UI button for that as well. And I'm going to say hello. And you'll notice what I did there by choosing the type. Normally it defaults to ID, and that's great and all, and you'll see that a lot, but the problem is with that, and I don't like to do it, is by the time you get in there, you then have to cast the sender to the object yourself. If you just do this right off the bat, by the time you get in there, as soon as you use sender, it'll be ready to go. It's the object type that's actually sending it, and you can get access to the properties right away without having to do the extra cast. So now, if we actually go ahead and go to the code, you notice we got our synthesized. So, update number one. One of the things I want to touch on for 4.4.1, you do not have to synthesize variables anymore. I'm very happy about this, as well as a lot of other iOS devs. You can literally get rid of those synthesized. Auto synthesize is a new feature of 4.4.1 Xcode. Any property you create now is automatically synthesized, and just to prove that to you, just so you don't think I'm full of it, is I'm going to run it. No errors, no issues. We got our label. Everything's good to go. So, that's kind of annoying, isn't it? Let me go ahead and get this out of full screen mode, because it keeps flipping back and forth as we're running the simulator. I'm just going to go ahead and make this like this. And that way, when I run it, I don't keep getting swapped back and forth. I apologize, I should have done this from the beginning. Okay, so there we go. Auto synthesize, awesome, new thing, great. So no more having to synthesize your stuff. Alright, so here's our hello function. Let's just do this really fast. Self.hello label, text, hello, Coco, touch, yay. Alright, cool. So this is back to where we were before. Good stuff. I think that label's a little too high. Alright, so here we go. We're good. Let's see here. I'm just setting that size, simulated metrics to the full screen. That's just something else I think that it did by default in the other stuff. So anyway, hello Coco Touch. Here we go. So we just recreated a project. We're in 4.4.1, latest Xcode. Used the new empty application template. Recreated all the steps that Apple would do for us before, make things more visual, not code level stuff. Using the proper main window app delegate. Now here's the thing. I'm going to show you this now, and I'm going to go through some UIView stuff now. And what I'm going to leave you for as an exercise and kind of homework is to look into, read about UIViews, look into them, do a little reading and research, because on the next tutorial, what we're going to get into is using more of the views. But also what I'm going to show you is something new with iOS 5 and greater, and that's where I'm really going to focus, is because most of the market share now is iOS 5, and now 6 is going to be coming out, and things are really going to blow up and progress toward there very quickly because of all the feature set. But one of the newest things is something called storyboarding. And basically it's spending a lot of time in the interface builder, graph paper kind of view, but you're literally storyboarding or working with your entire UI and using something now too called Segue that actually lets you create the entire flow of every view. So if you click a button and you want to transition from one view to another view, you can have a segue into that view, and you can set the transition types. So anyway, we're going to get into that, deep dive into that piece in the next tutorial. We're going to talk about storyboarding. We're going to talk about something called view controllers, which is huge and very important. It's the next major step that we're really going to touch in on. I want to talk about views today, but obviously the view controller is basically a container object and obviously a controller in the MVC paradigm of basically housing the view and being the controller code that communicates between the view and the model. But anyway, let's get to what I wanted to talk about in this tutorial today and touch on, which is one of the most important objects in UIKit and iOS that you will deal with And why it's so important is because everything you look at on the screen and interact with on an iPhone and iOS is a UI view. So in UIKit, which is the framework for everything to do with anything to do with the user interface, everything visual, right, is a UIKit framework, and the UIView is the core fundamental piece of UIKit. So what is a UIView? So everything you see on the screen, the labels, the buttons, images, anything you interact with and see on the screen, literally is a UI view. A UI view at the basic lowest, I guess, level is basically a area of the screen that has basically some properties, and two major properties that are pretty big is what they call a bounds and a frame. And they're both of type property CG rect. And a CG rect is made out of an origin and a CG point origin and a CG size objects, right? So within the CG rect, you have a origin point and you have a size structure as well that make up that rect. The point or origin being the X and Y where it starts, and then the size being the width and height of the view. So the bounds is relative to itself, and that just specifies the size of the view. That says usually the bounds X and Y is always going to be 0, 0, and then you have the width and the height of the area that view takes up on the screen. The frame, however, is important too, and the frame is the origin and the width and height of the area that the view takes up relative to its parent view. Okay, and UIViews, everything that you see on the screen at the end of the day is basically a hierarchy or object graph of UIView parent-child relationships. So at the very top level, at the very, very top level of everything you look at your screen, you have the UI window at the very root level, UI window, and every time you add a new subview onto it, it's coming out at you. You're adding a subview, you're adding a subview, you're adding a subview, and you're adding a subview, right? So at the very, very root level, the UI window is the most root and parent UI view there is. Everything gets added to on top of that is a child. So those are the big things. Is you're going to be doing a lot of adding subviews. There's methods to add a subview to a UI view. There's ways to remove from superview. So there's a lot of methods you're going to use is add subview and remove from superview, or two methods you'll use a lot. You'll mess with, like I said, the frame and the bounds a lot. And then of course there's other standard properties like hidden, alpha, which is like the opacity. There's if it's opaque or not. There's the background color, which obviously you'll mess with a lot. Yeah, so I mean those are the basic fundamentals. So, I mean what I like to do is we're just going to throw a view on here, just a standard square UI view from our object library over here, and we're just going to set some properties, and then on our button press, we're gonna change some things here on our thing. We're gonna change this to say something more like do something, and what we're gonna do is we'll go ahead and get rid of our label, and let's do that now. I'm just gonna get rid of the little label. So what we're gonna do, let's go ahead and create this. Go down here and scroll. You will find a standard UI view. UI view represents a rectangular region in which it draws and receives events. I mean, can't explain that any better. That's exactly what it is. It's a rectangular region defined by, I told you, either the bounds of the frame, the bounds being the size of that rectangular region, and then the frame being the size of the rectangular region relative to its parent, right? So in this case, the view's parent is the window, and you will literally notice that if I go up here on the utility pane and I go to the show the size inspector up here, this has the X and Y coordinate, width and height. This is within the CG rect. This is the origin piece, and this is the size piece, and that's the actual name of the properties. You'll actually say and within the in the frame you'll say dot origin dot x or dot y, and then you'll say frame dot size dot width or dot height, and you'll see that here in a few minutes, right? And you'll notice it's 20 points, and I'll get to that in a second. You'll notice I said points and not pixels. So it's 20 points over x, 55 points down is where it starts. It's got a width of 280 and a height of 97 points. Why I say points is on the iPhone, the original size of the iPhone was, before Retina days, was 320 by 480. You know, you can look all that up. Most people know that. 320 by 480. And that's exactly how many pixels there was. So it's kind of a one-to-one thing. So you always hear a lot of people say, oh, 320 pixels by 480 pixels, you know. And then the iPad was 1024 by 768 pixels. With Retina now, though, because you have to be very careful, there's a basic measurement which Apple says to use, which is points. And the points is based on the original sizes. So an iPhone, when you're calculating where things are laid out on the screen, it's going to be based in points, and it's using the original coordinate system. So 320 points wide, 480 points high, and the same thing with the iPad. And then you have to use basically scale properties and various things, which we'll get into in other tutorials, to basically calculate the relationship there with the Retina. Because with Retina, obviously, currently, for example, on the iPhone, it's double. So it's actually 640 pixels by 960 pixels, because the scale is 2, right? It's 2 to 1. But as far as points go, and as far as we're concerned, layouts, it's 320 wide, 480 high. That's why I said points. That's a very important thing. Just make sure you're aware of that. So we have this here. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to go to the attributes inspector. I keep doing this just so I can relate to you guys. I don't remember all. I got to the point where I know where they are and they're laid out visually. I don't know the exact names of the inspectors, so I apologize. I keep like waiting till my mouse hovers over them so I can explain to you guys what they are. So this is the attributes, identity, I think help, yep, and then the file inspector. So the attributes inspector, you know, this is where we're going to change the color. I'm going to make it something bright so you can see it. Let's make it bright red. So, okay, we have a red standard UI view. Let's go ahead and go to our assistant editor. Let's control, drag. Let's create a property for that. I'm just gonna call that our, you know, play view, for lack of a better. And then now we have a property set to our play view, so we can actually modify properties here. So now let's go to the code where we used to modify our label here, and I'm going to turn that off. And so what we're going to do is let's go ahead and when we click it for now, let's do something simple. Let's change the background color. All right, let's do something yellow. So UI color class allows you to create colors, and there's a bunch of built-in ones like red, blue, black, gray, light gray, things like that. You can also create colors using hue, saturation, levels, and brightness. You can use it doing UI color from red, green, and blue. It's all in the documentation. I'm using the built-in ones to make it easy for right now. So if we were just run this right now, I click that button, it's going to change that red UI view that we put on the screen to yellow. Simple enough. So now though, let's change the frame. So relative to the parent, we want to switch the frame and let's move it down on the screen. Let's say we switch it and we want to move it down 100 pixels. So what we have to do is, you can't modify the frame using dot syntax just because, you know, you can't basically modify, it's a structure, and there's basically structures within structures. It's a very complex relationship there. So in order to modify it, you can grab the frame, tweak the frame values, and then set the property back on the UI view, set it back with the next frame. It'll then take all that and apply it for you. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a CG rect. So I explained that it's a CG rect structure or structure for the frame. We're going to call that current frame. we're going to say that that's part of the play view frame property. So I just got the frame, which is once again relative to the parent, which is the UI window. We're going to tweak dot origin. Remember I said it's made of two pieces. It's origin and size. The origin is a point which then has an X and Y. So we're going to say we want to move it down the screen 100 pixels. So we're going to modify the Y. That's all we're going to do right now. Then we're going to reassign it back to the frame property on the play view. So let's go ahead and run that. And click it, and there you go. So we just modified the frame value, tweaked it, then moved that down. So now, that's a UI view. Let me explain something really quickly because it's something you should take in, read up about it. So the class structure hierarchy, the most basic object, everything in Cocoa and Cocoa Touch is NS object, okay? Core foundation. Then from NS object, you then basically, it basically then inherits that and adds more to it as UI responder. UI responder adds the whole responder chain. You can read all about that. If you're already a Cocoa desktop developer or you've done some iOS stuff, some basic fundamentals, you'll know what UI responder is. But basically, it adds the ability, and that's where the UI responder comes into for the event handling for like touches began, touches ended, touches moved, stuff like that. And then on top of the UI responder is where the UI view comes into play. So a UI view can then interact. You can interact with the UI view. There's a responder chain basically involved in it. You can tap on it. You can override the responder events, and that we can actually just find out if I tapped on that view, then I can do stuff, right? So then the next level after that is UI control. UI control adds what they call the target action. Basically a set of basically UI control adds a target action as well as all the events. So an example would be a UI button is a UI control because it has a target of where to send the message when you tap on it, right? Remember you're calling an action or you're calling a selector or a method, but that message or method is on a target class or object. So you have to have the ability to set a target, and then you have to have the ability to basically set the action. So the target and action is the selector. So on app delegate it's the target, and then hello is our action, is the action, right? So that's what the UI control does. And UI slider, UI switch, things like that you've used to seeing when you're looking at iPhone. Just to show you real quick here, these are all controls you're very familiar with when you see them. For example, a slider control, right? And then you have a switch control. These are all interacting, so these have to have targeted actions, and these also have to have all the events. So if I right click on this, you'll notice I have all the events here, and that comes from the UI control. And there's also a value changed here. So I can basically set, hey, when the value changes on the slider, let's call a method. So here's the target, and the action is going to be, whatever method I want you to call when that value changes. So once again, so the UI view, very important. Everything's a UI view. Like I said, read into it. UI control. That's the next step after this. We're going to be deep diving into UI view controller and more UI views. But now we're going to start tying more into on the next the next tutorial. We're going to get into where the view goes from here, right? So the more basically UI view controller, where we're going to start getting into the fact that every UI view controller has like a root view, and then it has a relationship of views you're going to manage. Those views most of the views all have, it's the delegate pattern, right? So you're going to be able to say that this view does something, right? All the view knows how to do is update itself and have the user interact with it. But then it needs to be able to say, to talk to something, to a delegate object, right? To a target, and say, I need this information or something's happening. the user just tap me and do this, right? And that's the controller. And then the controller can sit there and say, okay, I'm handling all that, kind of like the glue code. And you might have some kind of model that supports what the view's looking at, whether it's a table, like, you know, names, addresses, whatever, right? And that controller is kind of handling the logic of keeping the model separate from the view. And that's kind of where UIView controllers come into play. And UIView controllers are used everywhere within navigation, tab bar controllers, and we're going to get into all that. One last thing though before we wrap this up is just want to show you is the ease in which you can animate. You can basically animate properties on views. Animations are super important. Everything on the iPhone, one of the big things is you don't realize is that there's a subtleness to everything you use in an iPhone when Apple designed it, is animations play a very important key role. If you record, go into your apps and just navigate back and forth and do things, if you were to record that with a video recorder and then slow it down frame by frame, you'd be very surprised at how many animations you're seeing happen. It's pretty wild. But that's what adds to the fluidness as well as the user experience that Apple is obviously known for and what it's talked about a lot on the iOS side. And in fact, even you know, Android in a lot of ways, and like the latest Jelly Bean and ice cream sandwich, you've seen the progression. They're starting to do the same kind of things. They're making that more of a first-class citizen, more so now than they used to. And it is because it really is important. It goes a long way. So because of that, transitions, animations are huge as well. And I just want you to make sure you walk away from this tutorial realizing that UIViews and everything to do with UIViews and animations and transitions things are super, super important. Read up on those, and then that will, when we go into the next tutorial, we'll start putting all those pieces together. So real quick, what we're going to do is when we click this button, we're going to now animate the view from the current frame to the next frame. So it's going to slide nicely, and then while it's sliding, we're going to go ahead and we're going to fade it out. Okay, we're gonna change the alpha or opacity. So let's do that now. So we already got the current frame. We set the origin here, which is perfect. But we don't want to set the properties until we're ready to animate them. Apple on the UIView class gives us class methods, and a really nice one for animation and using the new blocks. So if you go to UIView, animate with duration and animation, we have a block there that we can provide. So I'm going to use this method. For the animation, we want to have the animation occur over a 1 second duration. And then I'm going to go ahead and just double click this block here. And now anything I put within that block, it's going to be animated. That the property will animate for us. So literally, I take this, I'm going to copy this, the frame being changed, and I'm also going to say self.alpha, play view alpha equals 0.0f. And when I run this and type and tap that button, it's literally going to animate nicely. The button's going to animate as well as fade out. And there you have it. So anyway, that's just a recap. We're using Xcode 4.4.1 now. Apple's added new features, a lot of new stuff that we're going to touch on. I didn't even get into some of the really awesome stuff, but one of them being auto-synthesize. You don't need to synthesize your variables anymore. One reason you see the one here, for example, is because Apple's built in the assistant editor when we're doing stuff through the view and the code that way. It's still their code, and Xcode still does that for you. But it's not needed. I can get rid of this and it'll still run. We went through and recreated all the pieces needed to basically get back to what the window template used to do. And we went ahead and touched the base on what UIViews are, why they're important, how easy they are to animate, and then of course that will be a perfect segue into the next tutorial, where we'll talk about more about UIViews and delegates of the UIViews, and then the view controllers, which are really important. And then, like I said, we'll touch on storyboard because that's how you lay out your view controllers and your views now with Xcode latest versions, as well as iOS 5 and later. So anyway, thanks everybody. Please subscribe. Let your friends know if they're interested in learning iOS and mobile dev. Turn them on to my videos. Give me feedback. Tell me what I'm not doing good. Tell me what I could be doing better. in the sense of like if there's more information, if there's other tutorials, what I should be touching on in the next one. If you got any kind of requests, let me know. And please also follow me on Twitter. My handle is bstallhood, so at bstallhood, and that's BSTAHLHOOD. Follow me on Twitter, my updates there, and of course subscribe on YouTube so you get all further updates. And like I said, I plan on doing a lot more tutorials. I've said that before. I apologize, but like I said, with the man cave and everything I got going on now, I'm hoping to actually put some more time into these. It's something I really want to do. Thanks again. Take care.